My job as a parent is not to make a mini me. It's to create a world that is safe for my son to figure out who he is and support whatever direction that is. It's really about empowering, using questions and using redirection and really like speaking. Like one of the things that we've always done, and this is across the board, open about everything. It doesn't matter the topic, drugs, sexuality, blank, races, like any conversation is an open conversation and everybody is spoken to like they're adults.
Welcome back to Raising Game Changers podcast. We have a very special guest tonight with us. We have George Bryant, the host of the Mind of George show. I love George for mostly because he taught me how to be authentic myself when it comes to business, something that I didn't think is possible before. I actually thought business is all about hustling and bustling, and being authentic self actually freed me in business. And I thank you for that. That was a big revelation to me that you can be your fucking self and at the same time conduct business and not hold back, not hold back any punches. Just be yourself, man. And your audience will find you, your people will find you. And just,
Mm-hmm.
it was very revelation. But my first question to you is this. I listened to the story about why you wear pink. And I loved it. I fucking loved it. So I want you to share that with my audience. Why are you wearing pink all the time?
Yeah, God, you know what's so funny? I'm so glad you asked, but because we have a long show, I love this question so much because this question, in the world of business and marketing, you kind of find these little pockets of things that work that you never expected to work. For whatever reason, this story or the open loop around this story is like the number one thing people ask me. So from like a marketing perspective, it is my favorite thing because every time I keynote, I'm like, oh yeah, and if you guys are wondering about the pink, don't worry, I'll tell you the story. And I never tell it in the keynote on purpose because after the talk, everybody comes and asks me, and I
Mm-hmm.
love telling this story so much. So here's the story about pink. So I'm gonna have to paint a bigger picture, so you're gonna get some more context. So for context, I was an active duty Marine for 13 years, right? And I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. And so most of my life was spent in a tumultuous childhood, and then I joined the Marine Corps. So as soon as I joined the Marine Corps, it was clean shaven every single day. And I started shaving my head after my first deployment, right? So like hair was not in my life whatsoever. I'd never had a beard. I'd never had anything. So when I get out of the Marine Corps 13 years later and I meet my wife, I do the same thing most Marines do is I don't shave like at all, right? For like 18 months. So I ended up with a beard down to like my middle sternum. And I looked horrendous, right? Like I've ramified every picture off the internet. I can't find them anymore. It's great. I figured out a way, but they don't exist anymore. There's one spot because I filmed a television show at Creative Live with Abel James in a chef coat with a giant beard. So there's like some evidence somewhere, but I'm not going to find it, right? So I grow up my hair too. I even had a comb over, right? And so with my wife, Ron, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This is horrendous. Like, I hate hair. And she's like, well, let's just shave it into a mohawk. And so she gave me a dope mohawk and I loved it. And so I was like, cool, I'll keep it. And then I shaved the beard, but then she got pregnant. And I was like, whatever the baby is, I'm going to dye the mohawk. And so I dyed the mohawk blue when we found out it was a boy. And then, so I kind of like started with some eccentric color and then I was fine. And then my son was born and I was like, oh man, I kind of wanted to dye it pink. Like I just wanted to have a pink mohawk. And so my wife ends up buying my son this pair of pink shoes. These little kid shoes, they're called native shoes and they're pink. And he wears through a pair and I don't know, maybe like a year. And then she's like, I need you to go buy another pair. And when I'm on the website, I notice that they have adult sizes in matching colors. And I was like, well, shit, those are dope shoes. And I was like, I love them. And they were a dream, by the way, because they're made of silicone. They're like Crocs and Converse had a
Cool.
baby. So they were functional and you can wash them in the sink or dishwasher. Socks, no socks, gym, water. I love these things, right? And so we start rocking these pink shoes together and he loves it. Pink's his favorite color. We do this for 2.5 years, no problem. Ends up in a private school, comes home from school one day and says, Daddy, I can't wear pink anymore. It's a girl's color. And I was like, who the fuck told you that? And I said that, and I think he was probably 4. And I expected some snot-nosed little kid, and he's like, my teacher. And I was like, get in the car. We got in the car within a minute, and I drove my race car, and I mean the fastest four-door sedan in the world at the time, uh, over there like I was on a mission. And I was like, Monica, what? And she's like, George, calm down. I was like, blah, blah. And I swear to God, and I'm going to own this. On the way over there, I was on Google. reading about pink so I could gaslight them. Like legitimately, I was like, pink was a royalty color. It was a king's color. It was used here. Marketers like me destroyed it and blah. Like I was like so rampant, and he wouldn't wear pink. And so she's like, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, fuck it. I'm going to make it my mission. And so one pair of pink shoes turned into like 10. And then I just started naturally grabbing like pink things, and I only wore black. Like I just have always liked black. And so now I start wearing these pops of color, but I wear pink shoes every single day. And so I end up keynoting at Brand Builder Summit for Ryan Moran, give a keynote on customer journey. Apparently it was a good keynote. Don't think anything of it. But then like 6 months later, I'm at Traffic and Conversion, and I have like 50 people come up to me and they're like, George, pink shoes, you're the customer journey. And I was like, shit, I made another social trigger. Here we go. And so at that point, I was just like, screw it. I'll lean all the way into it. And
I love it.
eventually my son started wearing pink again, but it also happens to be my favorite color. So then I have a color psychologist in my Rolodex, and she's like, it just so happens your favorite color of pink stands for revolution. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And she's like, nope. And she's like, let's do the whole brand. And so then I said, let's go. And I mean this, and I'm going to say this as an entrepreneur. I built and invested in my first ever professional designed website as an entrepreneur 16 months ago. I've been doing this since like 2009. Everything else was built by me, scrapped together. So like you don't need them to be successful, but now everything is pink. And so my branding is black, white, and pink. My website is pink. I legitimately am flying to Bali in 2 days to run a retreat, and I have a pink suitcase, a pink backpack. I have custom pink Timberlands that I only wear when I keynote or run my events that Timberland made for me to match the brand. Like, and pink
I love this more than
genuinely.
you can imagine. I love this. You know why? Because like all these so many limiting beliefs that our kids get don't even come from us. They come from the environment outside. The fact that your son started wearing pink again is a
Yep,
testament that you can actually overcome that shit,
you
you
can.
know, by leading by example. Because kids are mimickers, they mimic us more than anybody else. You know,
Yep,
one of the reasons I decided to start unschooling my child myself, who was going to one of the best private schools in New York City with the time when COVID hit,
yep.
is COVID was a blessing in disguise for me. It crushed my business, ruined them, right? I think you also cycled in
Me too.
2000,
Yep,
in 2020. So did I.
yep,
But what it did for me is it gave me that pause because I was like a rat in the cage, you know? And then I just
yep.
paused for a second. Everything stopped. And then I had a chance. He's home now, being on Zoom. And I had a chance, let me look into this education system because I thought I pay for the best private schools, they'll take care of it. I started paying attention to it and I realized, oh, this is shit. None of it is remotely. And we as entrepreneurs, like we embrace so many things to become better ourselves, right? So in the
Yep,
process, we learn a lot about personal development,
yep,
about how the brain works. And then when I looked at the education system, like, well, these motherfuckers don't apply any of this.
yep.
As
None.
on the contrary, they're doing the opposite of what they should have been embracing and doing. So
Yep,
just because I'm sending him to a best private schools means shit.
yep.
And then I also learned that Elon pulled his kids literally out of top 5 schools in America, Mirman School of Gifted and Talent in Bel Air in Los Angeles, and started his own little school at Astra. And that's when the alarms went off. I'm like, with
Mhm.
everything this guy's got going on, right? He did that. So what excuse do I have not to do something myself with that? If Elon with SpaceX and
Yep,
everything he's doing still found the time to make sure his kids get the proper education, which he
yep,
couldn't find even with all of his abilities and financial resources.
yep, yep. We did the same thing. It's actually why I live in Montana. It was after I lost everything in the business. My daughter was a freshman in high school, started doing Zoom, and my son was coming to an age to go back. Like he was in preschool, and my son at like formidable age of like 3 to 4 was isolated away from every kid his age. And we're like, this is not gonna fly. Like,
No.
and my daughter started sharing things, and she's like, she never wanted to move. She's like, I want to stay here. And then after a couple months remote, she started to see it differently. And then she's like, we can leave. And we left 3 weeks later, nowhere to go. We lived in 6 short-term rentals in 7 months when we moved to Montana. We packed up everything in a tractor trailer truck, put it in a storage unit when we got here, moved horses, snakes, kids, 3 cars, and lived in Airbnbs in the middle of winter and started new schools in a new state that we'd never been to. Like that's how we started. And so we did the same thing. And then here's the funny part. My son was supposed to have summer school this summer, and all the ones that we found, we didn't like the curriculum, how they were done. And then one of them was about to open, and my wife was like, nope, we're opening our own. And we ended up opening a summer school, and then the other one ended up closing, and we ended up running the summer school because we wanted a better place for our son to be nurtured and actually learn skills and not be babysat and like actually be stimulated. And so like we did the same thing.
Well, that's props to you, man. But it also speaks to the testament of the fact that entrepreneurship, and you're an entrepreneur, builds resilience. You're kind of used to the fact that shit goes wrong all the time, and you just adapt on the fly. So when I was trying to think, well, how do I raise a kid ready for the future? Because what do we know about the future, right? It's only one thing that we know. We used to know, well, at least we were brainwashed to believe two things, right? The taxes and death are certain. Now I learned through my ex-partner was a tax consultant. I learned taxes not fucking certain for sure.
Nope, it's
You
not.
know, but now we also know that
That is
it
an
seems like,
entirely different podcast we're not going to
yes,
do.
yeah, but it's complete horseshit. And then I also now we're looking at like even death might not be certain because we're about to reach escape velocity, right? For every year you live, they can regenerate your body by more than that. So that's no longer a certainty. But one thing that's for certain is the constant rate of change is going to be increasing forever. Our kids are going to be
1000%.
living in a world that never existed before.
Yep.
So I was thinking, look, how do I prepare them for that? And the answer came to me very kind of like intuitively because I'm an entrepreneur and I've struggled and I've failed and all that. And I'm like, well, this is the best fucking school is entrepreneurship. I mean, it teaches you everything you need to know. Most importantly, resilience, adaptability, and ability to learn new things quickly, and being creative and thinking outside the box. So it checks everything off. So in 2020, when it hit, we started to look into like what's available for kids to become entrepreneurs. And everything we found was garbage, right? Because I've listened to guys like you, to Alex Charfan, to Russell Brunson, to Dan Kennedy. Now there's Hormozy out there, guys that are way above me in terms of entrepreneurship. But everything that I found for kids was total nonsense. So we started doing something ourselves. We published this book, My Kid Entrepreneur. We started with that, which is actually by now a little bit outdated. I got to do a second edition of this. And then we went on this journey. And what I'm seeing right now with my son is amazing, how he actually is developing resilience, how he understands these setbacks is just part of it, and it builds and builds and builds. But what I wanted to ask you is like, how do you, because I've listened to you quite a lot, and I know how much knowledge you have on personal development. So how do you apply that to raising kids that are going to be resilient? How do you like take the lessons from entrepreneurship and pass on to your son? I know your daughter is much older than your son, right? She already graduated from high school. So maybe you didn't have as much chance to do it with her as you're now going to be able to apply with your son. So how do you process that and how do you apply that, man?
Yeah, this is a great question. So first, like I am not an expert, right? Like I figure this out every day. I learn, I make mistakes. So like I'm blessed first off. So I was a monster when I got out of the Marine Corps. There's no other way to describe it, right? Like I had trauma from my childhood, sexual trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, homelessness, social services, divorce, abuse, like you name it, it was stacked. And then I went and spent 13 years of my life on an active duty, 3 combat deployments, multiple physical injuries, emotional injuries, death, suicide, addictions. And then I get out and I become an entrepreneur before I get out and it becomes my new addiction. And I meet my wife about a month before I got out. I'd never done work, never done personal development work. I just pretended everything was okay. And she was 15 years into 15 years into hypnosis, NLP, personal development, consciousness work. And so when I met her, my now bonus daughter Cheyenne was 5. And so I walked into kind of like the dream parenting situation because this 5-year-old was like articulate and mature and responsible. Like I watched her get herself out of bed at 6 in the morning and make breakfast and put her uniform on for school and be ready to go, like homework. And I'm like, what the? And watching the languaging, and it took years, and I mean years. And so by the time my son was born and I had started in the world of personal development and healing myself and working through that, we kind of both had these awarenesses that we were breaking the generational patterns and traumas of both of our lineages on both sides. And we became hyper aware of the patterns that we both had. And we were like, okay, cool. So the thing that I would say, and that was taught to me that I really, really surrender to, is that my job as a parent is not to make a mini me. It's to create a world that is safe for my son to figure out who he is and support whatever direction that is. And that, like, I think ultimately, like at the end of the day, is like number one. And number two in that is that I'm also human and I coach people for a living and I have all my own flaws and I've become a very big victim of the paradox of my work and getting trapped in my own cycles, right? And so, one of the things is that like it's really about empowering, using questions and using redirection and really like speaking. Like one of the things that we've always done, and this is across the board, open about everything. It doesn't matter the topic. Drugs, sexuality, blank, races, like any conversation is an open conversation and everybody is spoken to like they're adults and everything is always constantly like calm and reassured and ask questions, right? Like we use consistency more than anything, but knowing like I have a banshee of a child. Like, let me just call it what it is. My joke is the universe gave my son the most aggressive parts of both my wife and I with none of the insecurities. Like that's what we have. Like this kid is off the walls, nannies get run down, we get run down. There's no empty gas tank and he is out of control and we love it. And one of the hardest things for me as a parent is to not put my adult paradigm on that of like, this shouldn't be okay. Like, this is completely okay. Go be wild, go be a kid, go get it out. And so for me as a parent, I feel like I'm more of the child than I am the parent because I learn more from watching my son and watching my daughter than I do feel like I teach them. And so I think just like coexisting and realizing that there's lessons on both sides. Like, I feel like
Yeah, for
I
sure.
learn just as much from my kids as I could potentially teach them, if not more. And I feel like that humility and that understanding creates an environment that's really about co-creation, not like it's my way or the highway. And of course, there's parenting that has to come in. But for me, I just think it's really, really important to just understand that like I don't know who my son's going to be. I don't know who my daughter's going to be. And that's not up for me to decide. I
It's
know that they get to figure out who that is and what that looks like. And if I happen to see a roadblock or two that might be coming, I might be like, hey, it's coming. If you decide to drive over it, here's where your spare tire is. And here's my phone number. But if you don't, here you go. But I feel like just constantly grounding myself in that and focusing on what truly matters is really, really it. And I think I'm blessed to be, 40 years old and realize that the only thing I want in life is more time with people I love. And that
for
just keeps
sure, man. Yeah.
priorities, kind of focused.
It's
And
interesting that your journey into parenting is somewhat similar to mine, even though not at all, but somewhat
mm-hmm,
similar in terms of when my son was born. I think I was destined to be like the worst fucking father ever.
mm-hmm,
I used
mm-hmm,
to drink, do
mm-hmm,
drugs,
yep,
gamble. I would
yep,
spend literally 70 to 80 hours a week in my office, working
yep,
my ass off, right? And when he was born, I'm like, wait a second, like I got to be a father now. So I got to reevaluate all these things. And now I started learning a lot more. And I realized, holy shit, like everything I knew about parenting was wrong. And thankfully, my wife at the time, she was way ahead of me on the developmental stage. So she knew she had to protect him from me,
yep,
literally from my limiting beliefs, from my stupid ideas,
yep,
from my ideas about parenting, about punishment, about discipline, about
yeah,
all the nonsense that I thought is good parenting.
yep,
She had to shield them from me and like educate me. No, Zach, you got to read this book. No, please, can you read this book? No,
uh-huh,
can you listen to this guy? And as I was leaning into it, I'm like, wow, everything I fucking know about parenting is just backwards.
yep,
You
yep,
know, so she kind of saved my son from me, which
yep,
was a wild idea for me to realize. But then we come to the tools. And the tools I find in entrepreneurship are amazing because I'll give you like one example. So I'm sure you know the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People, right? So the very first chapter, he talks about how people do not handle criticism, right? If you criticize, they will never hear you. But how do you apply that to kids when you got to give them negative feedback? Well, I found the answer from Sharfan. When I was taking Sharfan's classes, he goes like, every time I want to criticize somebody, at first I give him five. The ratio is 5-1, 5 positive things before one negative. I'm like, there's my answer. Like literally, that's a tool that I took from entrepreneurship of how to handle employees to apply to my own son. If I ever want to give him feedback first, I give him positive feedback first before giving him one negative. Maybe the ratio is not 5-1, but definitely 3 to 4 to 1 first before doing anything else, right? Then understanding the importance of physicality, right? Of how the state, that was from Tony Robbins, the state of mind, how the state of mind affects how you do things. That some days everything is easy, and that's because you're in the right state of mind. So how do we make sure that kids stay in the right state of mind? Comes from, well, if you work out every day, if you sleep well, if you don't eat sugar, you know, and if you play with other kids, and if you get outside and you spend time in nature, which when I learned about you, the fact that you moved to Montana, you would horse, I'm like, oh, it's fucking unbelievable. This is as nature, as close to nature as you can possibly get.
If you were to break down this wall behind me, between me and this wall, outside that wall is Glacier National Park within view. Like, I see it. I look at it every single day. Like one of the things that I figured out, and this is applicable, you want a tool, I'll give you the best tool that you could ever have. It's called environmental design. And it's meticulous and intentional environmental design, because
I love it.
There's an easy way and a hard way to win this game. And the hard way is to only make progress when you're on the field. The easy way is to make progress 24/7. And when you think about that, you have to think about all the things that are happening in your life and in your brain and in your existence when you're not actively executing a play that's going to move you forward, right? There's a lot of noise and things coming in. And when you start to meticulously build your environment and your habits and your routines around things that are consciously and subconsciously anchoring in who you want to be in the future and the things you want to achieve and the reminders that you want, you end up creating a world that you become a byproduct of. Like, your vision becomes an accident because everything around you kind of held yourself to getting there, right? And it's like no different than like if you want to lose weight over a year and you're like, I'm going to join a gym, and you had a preference of joining a gym where you were the only one in there every single day at 5 a.m. alone, or you were in there alone, but there were 30 other people there every day that you had the choice to talk to, chances are you're going to choose the 30 other people. Just so on those days that you're off or you need a little bit, that environment reminds you of why you're there and keeps you accountable. So it's easy to see. And what's so interesting is that, you know, I've been like really, really obsessed with figuring out why things work and how I create them. But it really boils down to consistency, right? More than anything. Like this game is won with consistency, and it's not consistency with the fun things and the glorious things. It's consistency with the boring things, right? It's doing the things that must be done, irregardless of how we feel. And it's so interesting because I've spent my life, like my entire life in therapy, trying to unpack and unravel the life that I lived to then turn it into something. And then I realized that after like 20 years of sitting in every chair you can imagine of every modality, for me, at least personally, every ounce of trauma work got to the point of having an awareness of the trauma to where when it happened in my body, it wouldn't cause a subconscious reaction. So I had an awareness. And then instead of allowing it to do that or overwhelm me, I got to a point where I could exist with it. And then they're like, here's a new behavior. And then go do that new behavior. And then eventually you do enough of those new behaviors that you change the belief, right? And I was like, cool. So what if I just sped up the process? If no matter what, I always have to put the new behavior in, if I always just have the new behaviors, I'll figure out the clarity in the process. And so I became obsessed with like daily habits and rituals, but not from the lens of like what it looks like, more from the lens of consistency, irregardless of what it looks like, no matter what happens.
I love that you say that. But here's an interesting perspective on this, George, because for you and I, it's very difficult to become consistent because we weren't neurowired this way from childhood. But we have tools now that we can do with our kids to make that easier for them. We can neurowire their dopamine to be released when they're that's one of the reasons I pulled my kid from school, and I'll tell you in a second the science behind it. But my idea was to neurowire the dopamine release to effort, not to milestones and achievement, so he wouldn't have to struggle with consistency the way I fucking did my whole life.
Yep.
You know, because
Yep.
here's a quote from your podcast episode with Basha that I love that episode, by the way,
Oh God,
is
thank you.
that, yeah, no, man, this one, commitment is not feelings, and we'll lose because we let feelings get in the way of our commitment. And what mitigates the feelings is taking the action that you committed to. But when we break it down neurobiologically, like what is commitment? That's when your dopamine, what is action? Like it's when your dopamine gets released through effort, when you're trying hard.
Hmm. Hmm.
And for you and I, and for most people that I know, it's very difficult. This is the hardest thing to do every time, is to stay
Yep.
committed to do the thing that you know you should be doing instead
Yep.
of feeling emotional or getting sad.
Yep.
And what I've learned is the science is there, man. It's just, it was never applied to us.
Yep.
The science is way there. It's called a growth mindset. And I know you know what that is, but it basically uh, the description is that fact that we can learn anything as long as you put in enough time and effort. But what is it on a biological level? On a biological level is when your dopamine is being released when you're trying hard. And what you need to do, actually, you have to reward only for effort and progress and never for achievement of milestones. But schools do the opposite, right?
Yep.
Schools reward you for knowing the right answers. They reward you for getting it right. They reward you for acing the tests. So when I've realized that, well, everything that schools do is the opposite of what I want to neurowire my son to do, that's like came to the realization I gotta pull him out, you know, from
Yep.
the environment of schooling. But that thought to me that the fact that the best schools today, like the knowledge is there, you motherfuckers, like you're supposed to be embracing that. And the fact that you're not is pissing me off as a father, because
Hmm.
we all want the best for our kids and we rely on schools, which is going to bring me to my next question right now. But we rely on schools because not everybody is an entrepreneur. Not everybody has the opportunity to raise their own kids. They have to rely on schools. They have to go to work, right? So I wanted to ask you for advice, because I've heard that from parents right now that we're doing this podcast and ask, well, Zach, I want to homeschool my kid. I want to unschool my kid, because the biggest uh, negative aspect that was always hypothesized about homeschooling is the social interaction. Well, that's been solved
Yeah.
today
It
because we
has.
have these groups and we can just facilitate social interaction quite easily. My kids right now every day spend with other kids, even though they're not going to school, right?
Yeah.
But what's really difficult for parents is, how do I quit my fucking job and
Yep.
what do I start on the journey of being an entrepreneur at home? So, and it's, of course, there's a million ways of doing it. Like you've spoken
1,000%.
many times, there's so many ways, but the fundamentals ways, like if you had to break it down to like, okay, guys, if you really want to get serious about this, like I would recommend a certain path, right? So
Yeah.
besides just getting on the path, that's obviously burn the boats, Tanya Robbins will say.
Like, and
You
is
know,
the question on like getting on the path of like being able to quit their 9 to 5 to be able to homeschool their kids, or in
kind
what
of, because like my
context?
brother's an employee, right? So my
Yep.
brother's asking me this question. Like, so what do I do, Zach? I told him, well, first start fucking learning. You know,
Yeah.
pick up a book
Got it.
and
Got it.
start
Yeah.
learning. But
So yeah, so here I'm going to answer this now, and I got you now. So um I've sat with this question a ton, and I mean a ton. And this question, and by the way, hold on, before I answer this, I just want to thank you. I just want to mirror something back to you. The way that you articulated the struggle of consistency made me feel very, very seen, which doesn't happen often, because that feels like my everyday still. Like that felt like my hour ago. And even, and not even joking, like getting ready for this podcast today. Today is one of my off schedule days. I fly to Bali on Thursday, but not really till Saturday. Like I have 4 days to get to Bali to run a retreat, and I'm leaving. Yep. But I'm leaving in the middle of like a massive personal life change. And I'm looking at my schedule today and I'm like, all right, well, I'll adjust it. I'll go to the gym here. And then I got here and my laptop wasn't working. And I have this stack of things that like must be done irregardless of how I feel today before I go, because I'm literally leaving the country and going to Indonesia. And so in my body, I have the list in front of me and I can see it so crystal clearly. I'm like, oh yeah, it's these three things. And it literally feels like there is a 75-foot cement wall between me and that task. And I know it's not there, but I also know that my body's like, some check engine light, some fear, some something isn't here. And in that moment, I'm like, well, I don't have time. Here's a cup of coffee. I'll come visit you later. I need to get on this podcast with Zach. Let's go. Right. But I want to say that because I think people all too often forget that it's always a game. And if you're looking at people on the field, no matter what it looks like, they still play it and they're
yes,
still playing it. And I think it gets isolated and isolating and lonely when you forget that, right? So to answer this question, I have a pretty unpopular opinion, I think, because I think the first part is the part that everybody struggles with the most. And this was the biggest struggle I had, is getting really honest with what you want. And I struggled because I convinced myself I wanted things that I didn't. And so all my effort was worth nothing because it was never going to work. And so it's really easy to say, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's really easy to say, I want to go make money. It's really easy to say, I want to homeschool my kids. I'm not homeschooling my kids because I do not have the physical capacity to homeschool my son. I know myself as a parent, and so does my wife. And so we look at options, and I'm like, well, I know that I can't do that. And it had to create this fire in me because I didn't have it. And business has been rough for the last year and going through some big challenges right now. And so I had to go make it. And so I had to get really clear, like, do I want this? Because my option is I have to do this, right? Which meant, okay, here's what my schedule will have to look like. Here's what my day will have to look like. Is this going to support my son the most? Is this going to support our lifestyle? And looking at the reality of that situation and then looking at the reality of the second situation was like, well, if I do this and we open this school and I hire this, we can put him here. It wasn't really a matter of how, it was really a matter of like which one's feasible. And then it got really, really clear. But I've struggled for years, and I mean like probably 12 years as an entrepreneur, because I just kept convincing myself that that race that I signed up for was the race I wanted, because I didn't sit with it long enough to really figure out what was important to me. And the reason I say this is like, I was just with some of my dear friends and clients, Carlos Machado. He's him and the Gracies in the jiu-jitsu world. They like brought, right. So they're cousins, and him and Lindsay are dear friends of mine. And he is a father of four, one of the world's greatest, like Coral belt in jiu-jitsu. They've been running this whole thing for 21 years. Their oldest child is 21, and they homeschooled all four of them while being the Machados, while building businesses from the ground up, moving families of 20. And I'm like, holy moly, right? But it's like when you can really get clear on what you want, nothing gets in the way. And I have figured out for myself that the only reason I've ever quote unquote struggled is because every goal that I was struggling to get to wasn't the goal that I wanted. So it felt like a struggle, because anything that I've ever really, really wanted, every bite I take out of it, no matter how easy or how hard, feels like progress. And so I think the deeper root of it is like really figuring out what it is, because there's plenty of situations where leaving a 9 to 5 might not be feasible. It might be
Yeah.
feasible to instill different beliefs in your child, or put them into a group, or have them listen to a podcast. Like my buddy Larry Hagner runs the Dad Edge podcast. They have like 100 million downloads. It is the best. He is one of the most incredible fathers, leaders. He has like 2,000 fathers he coaches. Like it's great. That whole environment is designed, right? There's resources, but I think what really, really matters more than anything, and this is how I'm going to answer this for everybody, is irregardless, stop waiting to have clarity on the whole picture and just start mitigating it now, bite by bite. And what I mean by that is like maybe you're not happy in your 9 to 5 and what's happening in your kids' schooling. And your dream is like, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want them out of school and I want them great. Great. Even if you have a rock solid plan, that could be 6 months away. What can be done right now, like today, like right now? Is there a book you could read that would give your child a tool? Is there a weekend that you could plan with them that would help them see it differently? Is there a behavior that could be done at dinner every night? Like one of my clients, I love this, every night at their dinner table with their kids, they do win, loss, gratitude. Like, what was my biggest win for the day? What felt like a loss today? And what am I grateful for today? And so every meal, and they do 3 meals together as a family, and the kids are 3 and 6. Every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner, every meal starts with win, loss, gratitude, win, loss, gratitude, win, loss, gratitude, right? And so we lose the game when we want something different, and we spend all the time dreaming and envisioning what that thing looks like perfectly, rather than being like, oh shit, I want something in that direction. I'm just going to start walking there today. And that's the game that really, really wins the game, right? Like, and I'm about to do this podcast on courage, but you know, like when you think about it, I found this clip of this linguistic expert that I follow. This guy's incredible. He just studies speaking and behavioral patterns, and I love watching his content. And you know, he talks about courage, and you're talking about earlier the development and the pathway, right? And I think one of the things that happens with consistency that we were talking about earlier is no different than goal setting. It's no different than anything. It's just a muscle that's atrophied that we haven't consistently retrained to use as a tool or to become like a subconscious habit that happens for us. And that only happens through momentum and consistency. And we lose because these things, these mountains feel insurmountable, right? We're like, holy shit, I only make 90 grand a year. I'm unhappy in my kid's school. I would need this amount of money. That mountain looks massive. The funny thing is, for me at least, is I know eventually I'm still going to have to climb up that mountain or start to figure out a path. And so irregardless of how big it is, I just need the first step, right? And that's it. And the first step could be sitting down and asking my kid what they want, figuring out if I have a hobby or passion. Is there anything that people have ever asked me to pay me money for? Like, because the thing that people lose on is they get crystal clear on what they think they want and what it's going to look like. And then they get frustrated when it doesn't, but you don't know what it's going to look like because you don't have it yet. You need a fuzzy direction. You need a fuzzy goal. And then you need to bite it down because like, here's the analogy I'll give you. Like if you tell me you want to lose 100 pounds in a year, you can spend the next 30 days planning. I don't give a shit. I promise you, if you do what I tell you, which is right now, make sure you drink 80 ounces of water a day and walk at least 30 minutes a day, twice a day, and sleep 8 hours a day. Do nothing else for the next 30 days. I promise you, you're going to be way closer and clearer than if you just spent that 30 days planning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when the emotions get involved and when all this stuff gets involved, all that is noise getting in the way of those same simple things. And so what I've realized and what I practice is understanding that all that noise is going to be there. They're like check engine lights. And all I have to do is give them a cup of coffee and diagnose what's underneath them. But it doesn't mean I have to fix it. If my windshield washer fluid is low and my windshield's clean, I don't give a shit. Sit there. Right?
It
Like,
actually makes me think about the quote you said, which is right here, is that the challenge that most entrepreneurs have is that they're addicted to consumption instead of creation.
yep.
And it's the same kind of paradigm with like people get addicted to watching about how to get fit, what to do about it. Dude, drink a bunch of water, go walking, and you'll see I know you lost like close to 80 pounds, you said, and I lost over 60 pounds.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy because I kept going back and forth. Like it's the fluctuation that used to piss me off. I would lose it and gain it back, lose it and gain it back.
Yeah.
But what really did it is doing the basics. Like you just said, just if you drink water, and I start my morning now with just drinking a bunch of water with freshly squeezed lemon and salt, right? I used to spend money on LMNT, on all that shit. And I'm like, why am I even doing what's electrolytes in essence? Let's just squeeze some lemon, put some salt, drink that.
But just one thing, because Rob is 10 minutes away from me and he's a dear
I
friend
love
of mine.
Rob. I get it.
LMNT, here's my guilty pleasure though. I drink black coffee only, but chocolate sea salt LMNT in an Americano,
is the shit. Is the shit.
Game over.
But
yes,
people,
I hear what you're saying. Yes.
People, I can't afford a lemon tea. Like, you don't have to afford a lemon
No,
tea. You can just make it yourself with freshly squeezed lemon and some salt. You can get fancy salt too, and that's kind of electrolytes you need. But go walking. And I have a dog. I have a husky, so I have no choice but to walk
you
every
have
morning.
to walk.
So for me, this was like the blessing in disguise. When I got her 5 years ago, all of a sudden, I now my fluctuations in weight are much less. Because
look at environmental design, right?
Like you said, environmental design.
Like when you think about that, knowing a husky, and by the way, I had a husky, and if you don't walk your husky enough, it'll dig a hole in your hardwood floor in your kitchen. Just one record, just learn that lesson, and they can dig through hardwood floors. I love you, Zeke. Rest in peace. But with that though, like if you think about it, you read like here's where like God, this could go really, really deep, but I won't. But like here's the thing that I think, and I'm going to summarize a really deep philosophy. I think 90% of the struggles that we have now came post-industrial revolution because every requirement for movement was taken away and replaced with comfort and convenience. And so what I mean by that is that like, and rough example, let's say 300 years ago, 200 years ago, you had a house, you had a fire, you had everything, but you guys didn't have any food. And you had to go out and slaughter 3 chickens for the family to eat dinner. If your wife and kids are in the house and you're sad, depressed, your business partner screwed you, he shot you in the leg, like whatever, you can feel however the fuck you want to feel. But until you feel that way and get up and go kill a chicken and get it ready, no one in the family is going to eat dinner. And it just so happens that if you get up and kill that chicken, you'll feel better in the process because it's going to release the emotions that you're stuck in anyways. And so it's like when you really, really boil it down, it's just about taking a bite forward out of anything, in that direction, no matter how small or how big. Like if you want to delve it down into analogies, is you only eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so if I'm sitting here and I'm like massively overwhelmed how my schedule's so slammed and I'm not going to get my hour workout in, but I have 30 minutes before we start this podcast, I can walk my happy ass out that door and go for a 15-minute walk and then come back and celebrate the shit out of it and then do the podcast and feel better that I did something rather than beat myself up for something I didn't do, stack all that resistance on, and then think I'm going to have a great day when all I'm doing is beating myself up. And so here's my deep point. And I mean, I sit in hours of reflection of this. The deep part of my philosophy, like my whole movement, everything in relationships beat algorithms, everybody thinks it's about marketing. It is in a way, but the true essence is that everybody spends every ounce of their day and time avoiding the relationship that they're guaranteed to spend the rest of their life with, which is themselves.
Yeah.
And if I look at myself in the mirror, and this is not for anybody else, and I look at where all my struggles came from because I didn't feel good enough just doing the basic things that I said I wanted, and I was looking for dopamine elsewhere. Like, for example, like 3 weeks ago, when I'm performing great, my fitness is dialed, my nutrition's dialed, and I'm feeling great, and I'm standing in the kitchen, and I'm literally eating handfuls of almond butter and chocolate chips while having the thought of, I'm not hungry, and I know this isn't going to help me, and I know I don't want to eat these. And I just kept eating them anyways. And then I had to laugh about it. And the next morning, I'm like, God, you silly fuck. You didn't even want those things. Right. And I was like, oh no, what was it? And I was like, oh, and here's the truth. I sat with that and I had to sit with the fact that I achieved something I set out to achieve. And I didn't think I was good enough to maintain it because I didn't want the chocolate chips. I didn't want the almond butter. I was having some emotional reaction. So then I laughed about it. And then I was like, oh, great. Dialed it back in. But at the core of it, it's like if you think about business as an entrepreneur, there's 3 things in my business that move the needle for me every day, no matter what. And if I don't do them, my business doesn't grow. And if I do them, my business does grow. There's 3 things with my physical health that if I do every single day, no matter what, are guaranteed to make me better. There's 3 things if I do with my kids every single day are guaranteed to make me better. And so if all I do is identify those 3 things and take at least one bite out of them every day, irregardless of how I feel, and then I teach my kids to do the same, I teach my team to do the same, I'm at least at all costs protecting progress, irregardless of what it feels like or irregardless of what vision may change. It's keeping me in it. And it also has this built-in safety mechanism because when your husky is smashing your leg saying, walk me at 7 p.m. and you had a horrible fucking day and you didn't hit those minimums and you're like, I have to go anyways. And you go walk and you hit the minimum and then you have the business idea of your dream or the clarity of your moment, you realize that it's always just about getting into an action that's aligned with where you want to go instead of reacting where you came from.
It's so interesting you say that because I can tell you, first, I used to walk her listening to music, and I stopped doing that because some of my best ideas come when I just fucking walk her and I think in silence.
Yep.
And the walks take much longer now because I'm not,
Yep.
there's no dopamine hit when I'm doing it. I'm just walking my dog and I'm thinking
There's
outside
no
the
finish
box.
line.
And it's awesome. And you say that as what Tom Bill you said to me on his podcast once really struck me is that, like, what's the purpose of life? And he goes, like, I identify it as being how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And that really hit home for me. I'm like, I need to be more by myself, analyzing myself, than escaping that through all kind of dopamine hits and consumption, whether it's music, whether it's podcast. Just be by yourself.
Yes.
And by the way, another tool I've learned from Ray Dalio. I'm not sure if you know who that is. He's one of the biggest hedge fund guys in the world, right? So he's self-made, comes from Queens. And in 2017, he published this book, Principles, and he was doing his book tour, promoting it. And he was talking with Rob Roth, Meditation Bob, they call him. And Bob asked him, "What's your number one secret for success?" And it hit me so because I was expecting some kind of like a genius answer, and
Yeah.
he said, "My number one secret for success is transcendental meditation."
Yep.
And I didn't even know what that was, even though my wife was a yogi, she meditates every day. I'm like, babe, what the hell is transcendental meditation? So I
Yep.
had to go and look into it. And then I went downtown, I went through 4 days of training and I started doing it.
Yep.
And it changed me completely. The biggest takeaway for me in terms of the meditation is that it made me a lot more patient with my kids, which before I had very hard time dealing with them in terms of their character and like I just want
Yep.
to crush it like my dad used to do to me,
Yep.
and now meditation made me a much better parent, and that's really what kind of hit me. But what I wanted to ask you is about, you mentioned the win, loss, and gratitude at night, right? So gratitude actually was, there was research done at Berkeley that they're saying the research showed that for every 9 bits of information we process 9 bits of negative for every one positive. We're just wired this way evolutionarily because we used to get eaten by cats,
Yep.
but now we no longer live in that environment, but we still process information this way. So you might get a bill in the mail and that will still affect you the same way.
Yep.
And they said that in all their research, gratitude is the only tool that changed that ratio from 9 to 1 to 5 to 4.
Yep.
So I started doing gratitude with my kids every night before we go to bed. We just talk about things that they're grateful for. They still don't get it. They're kind of doing it because I want them to do it. But we gamified. It's just fun now for them. They're just like, and every time I want to leave, like, Dad, you haven't said enough gratitude yet. Let's do some more of that.
They
You
get
know,
they get it. They just don't consciously, logically get it yet, but they get it.
right. But
They get
here's
it.
what I wanted to ask you because, and actually, before I do that, I want to reflect on something because you said that, and preparing for this podcast also was unusual for me. I never felt this nervous before because I never interviewed somebody I admired before. So
Mm.
that was an unusual feeling for me this morning. And I had to do way more push-ups than I usually do. I stood in cold shower for about 15 fucking minutes, just dosing my body with freezing water. And
Yep.
then at the end, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. So I went and I took half a gram of mushrooms
Yep.
just to, and it calmed me down like literally
Yeah.
10 minutes afterwards.
Well, like I think, and I'm gonna cut you off for a minute to hear something because I think like what people need to hear is like how incredibly safe that makes me feel because like it doesn't matter. Like I've done literally over 10,000 podcasts, right? But most of my days when I open my calendar and I look at it and I like open, I'm like, oh, I got Zach today. He's got a kids program, and I'm like, am I agendized? Am I going to say the right thing? Is my heart in the right place today? Like, how am I feeling? I'm like, how am I going to answer it? Like, I think about all of it, and I feel this like immense amount of pressure, and also this immense amount of self-reflection that I do, and it's a very razor fine edge. It's like a unicycle on a tightrope between self-deprecation and self-awareness, and I have a lot of people I have to reflect with every day because I get in my head because like I don't, like, to be real, I'm about to cry. Like I don't feel qualified for you to admire me, right?
No,
Like
man, you've impacted my life.
no, I know, and I appreciate that, right? And one hard thing that I talk about is that a lot of the things that I'm celebrated for, a lot of the things that people know me for and want me to talk about aren't things that I set out to achieve. They were byproducts of
Yeah,
survival, right? They
yeah,
weren't like, oh, I want to go tie a world record because I set out to tie a world record, or I want to be a New York Times bestseller because that was a goal when I was a kid, or I want to teach people marketing because I hate how shitty I was in business because of how bad of a person I was, right? Like every day of this journey is me trying to figure out who the fuck I am and figure out why all I care about is helping people, no matter what happens to me. Like
no,
that's the truth of it all.
I'm gonna
And
start.
then
You're gonna make me cry too right now, man.
the
Yeah,
weight of it, and the weight of it is the paradox. It's humbling because the more I think I know and the more people give me credit for helping, the more lost I feel. And the more I feel like I have so far to go. And it's this really beautiful, beautiful, polarizing place because there's days where I look at the gap and I'm like, yes, let's go, right? I'm like, purpose, right? And then there's days I look at the gap and I'm like, how? Like, how physically? Like, I know I've been through it, right? And I've been through it, and I've taken it, but like, I don't know if I can take anymore. And I'm like, well, wait, it's the whole point of me being here, right? There is no stopping. And so it's this really interesting place that I sit in because yeah, like marketing feels easy to me. Customer journey feels easy. Some of these things feel easy to me, but the pressure that I feel, like
Yeah.
every word that comes out of my mouth feels like life or death. And I reflect on them all. And I
The
mean all
the
of them.
imposter syndrome that I have to deal with every day when people ask me advice, and I have to struggle with it because I don't feel I'm fucking qualified at all to give advice. But at the same time, I know things that you don't. And how do I convey that to you in a manner where
And then here's the deeper part, because this is one of my favorite Thich Nhat Hanh quotes. Thich Nhat Hanh says, rest in peace last year, the moment you recognize you are, you no longer are. And here's the paradox. The moment you're thinking about the question or the answer, you can't give it anyways, because when you give it, you're not thinking about it, you're just giving it. It's only when we're reflecting on it that it's bad. So then I realized that in that time that I'm reflecting is time I should be in service using the gift rather than questioning the gift, because I have a tool in my toolbox that I'm not using.
yeah,
Because I'm more so figuring out why I have the tool rather than just using the tool. Right? Because here's the thing that I do to myself, and I don't know if this is helpful for you or anybody else, but I like to take myself to court a lot in my head, right? Judge, jury, and executioner. We all do. Um, and so one of my new favorite questions to ask myself on paper is when I'm doing it, I write on a piece of paper, what evidence would you bet your life on the line with to convince a jury of your peers that you're guilty of what you're thinking about? And I could never, ever, ever put on a piece of paper anything that literally comes close to being any shred of evidence that I could use. And what I realized for me personally is that I feel the responsibility of whatever this thing I know is, or this ability to see things or help people or coach people. And that responsibility, I'd say, is the biggest shadow of me feeling like, am I capable? Right? Like, is this, because it's that dance, right? Of like, who am I? Am I on the field? Am I not on the field? Right? Because I am my work as well. Right. And so
yeah,
I love it. I think it's great, but I think that's what the best leaders in the world do. And I am not claiming to be the best leader. I am far from it. Right. But when I look at people that I admire, when I look at people that I learn from, when I look at people that I respect and I follow, I'm not looking for the people that are talking. I'm looking for the people that are walking,
yeah.
and I
Of
follow
course,
them. And
of
I'm
course.
like, the
But
messier, the
it's
better.
but you know what? Like it's a phrase, right? It used to be just a phrase to me, but it's not a phrase anymore. It's really that way. Like the more I fucking learn, the more I realize how little I goddamn know. And I used to be way
Yeah.
more cocky and confident when I knew shit. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
it was so
Yeah.
easy back then. And the more I
I
learn,
know.
the harder it becomes because I realize how much I don't know and how much of what I
I
used to
know.
know is nonsense.
And then
You
the
know?
funny part now is anytime I realize I think I know, I now know I'm just being insecure and triggered. Like, it's just a fun game, right? And that's what it is. I think for me, I only lose when I forget that it's a game. It's not that I'm a bad person. It's not that I made any wrong decision. It's that I'm a human and I have emotions and I have a human experience. And I made a decision and a choice that I wanted to figure out how to harness this race car to utilize it to the best of its ability to achieve goals and impact, right? And in that means that I have to be willing to drive it, but I also have to be willing to work on it and get under the hood and do the oil changes and realize that I can't go trade in this car. I'm not
Yeah.
getting another one. And so it's almost like you don't have to do it, but you can't get upset that you don't win the race when you don't work on the race car. Right. And so it's really just a
That's a
matter
good,
of like,
that is a really good analogy, man.
yeah, like, right. Like, no, like, for example, right. Like, you show me a 7-figure entrepreneur. Hello. Oh, there you go. Sorry, I lost you for a minute. You show me a 7-figure entrepreneur that is sacrificing their health, and I'll show you one that doesn't have 7 figures in 6 months. You show me one that's prioritizing their health and preparing for who they're going to be in 12 months, and I'll show you somebody who's doubled their business. Right. And it's like, we live in this addiction of hustle, this go, 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 go. And we're convincing ourselves that all we want and the reason we're doing this is to have more time, money, and freedom. When the paradox is that the moment we achieve whatever false finish line we create, we're not going to be around long enough to enjoy it anyways.
Yeah.
And so irregardless, it just creates this massive, massive void that like can't be filled, that can't be, like, yeah, I don't really know, like just mitigated. I think it really, really boils down to, I think for me at least, where I am at this point is like, and I'll just explain, like, because we've been talking about tools a lot, and like
Yeah.
you said something earlier, and I wanted to say this. The most profound quote, and I mean words of wisdom, profound quote, top one that I've ever heard in my life, and I will paint the picture. I was in Costa Rica. My wife was 8 months pregnant, 7, 8 months pregnant. We were a couple weeks away from bankruptcy. Like I was at the low of the low, like the low of the low. And I was like crying to a shaman. And I was like dry heaving. I'm like, why can't I figure this out? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, tell me like what to do. And he's like, you have no vision for your life. Right. And he's like, what do you want? Blah, 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 blah. And I was just stuck here, and I was just looking for somebody else to tell me the answer. Like, where should I go? What direction? Like, and here's where I was like, tell me what to do as a husband. Tell me what to do as a father. Tell me what to do to fix this in the business. Like, what workout should I go execute? Right. But the thing is that it was mine. And he looked me dead in the eye, and he squared me up, and he said, do you know what your biggest challenge is? And I was like, what's that, Brad? And he's like, you've never been quiet enough to hear God's whispers. That's all he said to me. That's all he said to me. And then he said, I want you to do me a favor. And he said, write this on a piece of paper. And he said, just write, what do you want? And he said, you can come back and see me when there's an answer on this paper. And he sent me away. And it took 3 fucking days. 3 days. Crying, anger. I didn't know. I had no clue what I wanted. No clue. I couldn't tell you. I'd spent my entire life surviving. I couldn't tell one thing. And this is going to sound woo-woo and deep and blank. And after the second night of not sleeping and crying all night, I woke up and I walked over to a piece of paper, and all I wrote on that piece of paper, and I don't remember writing this, and I still have the paper, was to stand with structure in the face of resistance to create possibility. That's all I wrote. That was it.
That's so deep.
Now, 9 years later, my branding is a lighthouse. My trademark phrase is relationships beat algorithms.
Which I love, by the way.
I teach people to love their customers by putting their heart back into marketing and showing them that their story doesn't matter, that they can still be good people and care about people, right? Like everything in my life that you see right now was built by what was written on that piece of paper that I didn't even see until about a year ago. And that was written like 8 years ago. And so,
dude, that's deep. Your picture froze, but
oh yeah,
but the sound is coming in. The sound is coming in clear.
I saw it. Yeah, and I'll say this too, because I think that this is the most important part. Here's the tool. The tool is stillness. The tool is making sure that no matter what's happening, that your day in your life is around you. And what I simply mean by that is like when you wake up first thing in the morning, that is your most true, raw, authentic time to be yourself. And the moment you pick your phone up, you become the world's version of you. You need to be intentional about starting your day and ending your day with you. And so if that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you intentionally wake up in the morning and you go do something to be you. Barefoot in the grass, breath, walk, go have a cup of coffee, sit on the couch, but just create space for just you to exist. And you'll be shocked what happens in that space. And the same thing at the end of the day. But just make sure when you're spending your day and your time in your life flexing all of these muscles to achieve things, that you're flexing the muscle to receive things. And that muscle to receive things is just being. That's where you receive clarity. That's where you receive information. That's where you receive blessings. That's where you receive all of these things that you're putting all this effort into every day, so that you can see them, you can celebrate them, and then you can measure them and keep doing more of them. And that's the game. I think that's the most important part.
That really is resonating with me, especially because I'll tell you, when I try to, and I do now, but when I tried for the first time to actually leave my phone outside of the bedroom, I never fucking realized how hard that would be.
Yep.
It just shocked me to my core that I literally I can't fall asleep or something when my phone is not next to me. Like my wife is next to me, we're hugging, and she falls asleep, she gets knocked out. I'm like, I need my phone, right? So
Yep.
leaving the phone outside of the bedroom was one of the hardest things for me to actually overcome in terms of like being with myself when I'm going to sleep
Yep.
and waking up. I did it so I don't want to wake up with it. I don't want to wake up with the phone because it
Uh-uh.
was a terrible habit. Wake up with the phone, and then my day would go to shit right away because I would check my emails and go to social media and
Yep.
goodbye. You
Yep.
know,
Yep. Yeah. So like
and
here's the thing. Like I say that like God, I could do this in so many lessons, but like I have to earn the right to even work every day. But like I have to earn the right to go into the world. Like before I even like see another human every morning, I've done like 6 things in my entire daily routine. Like they're done already. My stillness practice, my journaling, my morning cardio, my alone time, my water, my greens, like before like 6:45 in the morning. And so by the
yeah,
time my son wakes up, I'm just giving away this man that was like, irregardless of how I felt, just feels like a savage ready to go. Right. And it just sets me up to win so much. And so like my phone is not in my room. And when I talk about environment, right, I use my Whoop, it vibrates at 5:30 in the morning. And then outside of my bedroom door are my running shoes, my shorts, my heart rate monitor, and my tank top. So I walk out the door and there's a water bottle with greens in it. And I pick it up, drink it, get dressed, walk to the treadmill. I do my 30 minutes. My phone is in the bathroom with my supplements. So when I
mhm.
get done with my 30 minutes, I keep my iPad on the treadmill so I can watch YouTube. I watch Andrew Huberman when I'm doing my morning cardio. And then, and I don't like, I'm not trying to sprint or anything. I'm like, how do I feel? Right. And so when I get dressed, I walk outside barefoot. I stand in the grass for a minute. I breathe and I'm like, what feels good right now? And I'm like, oh, my legs feel fresh. I'll run, or they're sore. I'll walk, or I feel like walking backwards. I just pick something. I do it for 20 to 30 minutes. Then I go jump in the shower, cold shower, supplements, boom. I open my phone, I write down my gratitude, I do blank, 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 and then I go wake up my son. And then
You
when I'm
know,
in the car and on my way, I still don't do work. I then tune into my stuff on the way to the office to figure out what I have to do for the day. So I prep my notes. I come to the office, then I hit my 3 needle movers, which is this podcast. And as soon as I'm done, I have 2 intros and 3 Instagram clips. And then as soon as I'm done with that, that is the first time I'm allowed to look at my inbox, my Instagram, my email, anything. Because I will not touch it until I have created what I have to create for the day that is only from me. And
I
so I've
love it.
not looked at anything, and it's 11:15 in the morning.
And it brings me to this note that, first of all, I have a selfish wish for Huberman to have kids one day because I
Yes.
want to see how he applies this enormous knowledge of his to raising his own game changers, because it'll be transformation. I think it'll be
Yes.
amazing to watch him do it.
Yes. Yes.
And also it brings me to my another thought that I love Hormozy, but a lot of the shit he says about like morning routine is overrated. And I always think, yeah, that's because you don't have fucking kids, man.
Well,
You know,
yeah, but you gotta look at context, right? It's like comparing apples to oranges, right? I'm like, don't
yeah,
allow the messenger to affect the message. I was like, but if you look at Alex, he doesn't have a morning routine because his entire day is routine,
that's a good point.
right?
That's
So
a good point.
like you got to kind of look at it, right? So everybody's a little bit different. And I have seasons like I don't have like a strict like so here's what's funny about what I just explained. Every morning I have that like 45 to 50 minutes. That's what I give myself. What I do in that is different depending on how I feel, but it's just protecting that time, not what happens inside of it, right? Because no matter what, I'm going to do something inside of it. And I'm going to protect that more than anything, right? And so that structure is more important to me than like what happens in the middle,
I
right? Like
think the
I'd
biggest
rather,
thing in the morning for me as a father is just to wake up way earlier than my kids. I learned it from Jocko.
yeah, you
When
have to,
Jocko,
you
yeah,
have
that's
to.
it. That changes the game because I get a lot more shit done. By the time my son wakes up, I already feel like I've accomplished so much. I feel like a better
Yep.
parent, and I'm not
Yep.
anxious anymore
Nope.
about these things because I've done the work already for an hour or two. So now I can actually have this peace of mind to spend with them in their
Yep.
mornings without worrying about the shit that I would have normally worried like crazy.
Yep.
and kind of put it out of the way. But we've been over an hour, man. I want to ask you one last thing before we
Yeah,
wrap
let's
this
do it.
up. And if we can do this again, I would be really grateful because I have
Yeah, we
so
can do
much more I
another
want
one.
to talk to you about.
Yeah, we can do another one.
So, what I want to ask you about, because you've had a very transformative experience with ayahuasca,
Yeah.
and so did I. I did ayahuasca for the first time about 2 years ago during COVID lockdowns here in upstate. I didn't go to Peru yet, which is what I'm going to do next. But like after this, and I started doing psilocybin after that as well. And I'm learning about this immense benefits of psychedelics. And I hate the word psychedelics because the word psycho, I think, is just a very negative spin on something so positive.
I just call it medicine.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. But even, the word medicine in my mind now
I
these
know.
days
I
is
know.
not exactly a positive spin on things. But so now we're talking with my wife about like, why don't we actually, kind of like forget the old mantra of bullshit education. Like, why don't we start with some psilocybin with kids earlier than it's traditionally allowed or okay? Hey, George, I lost you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know what's
Okay,
happening to my video. Just hold
that's
on
fine.
one second.
That's fine. So I just wanted to ask you, have you processed this at all? Like, have you thought about medicine or psilocybin or some kind of with the kids at all? Because we're thinking about doing a ceremony with Sky. He's 9 now. We were thinking about 13. And now my wife is like, well, why wait? It's all these immense benefits of, a brain development and the BDLF, like the brain derived neurotropics that come from small doses of psilocybin. Why wait? There's no research on this, obviously, because, if psilocybin would be allowed to research, it would put the pharma industry out of business almost. Well, not all of it, but a large part of it, like SSRIs. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, we think about it often. We talk about it, and I don't know what's happened in my video. I apologize. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I hear it just fine.
Okay, okay. The thing for me about plant medicine, about psychedelics is I have an interesting relationship with them because I've done them all and they saved my life. But in now doing it, I also realize that all they are faster vehicles to find and instill tools, but all that remains is the integration. Like the plant medicine itself, the clarity, the night, the sitting with ayahuasca, the intention, the microdosing psilocybin, the whatever the path is a path to find clarity in a tool, and then the real work is the integration and the keeping of that tool forever, right? And I think that that's the most important part, is that plant medicines don't give you anything you don't have. They help you remember things or find things, speed up the process of eliminating noise, and then give you tools or a workout that once it shows you, it's like, here's what you want, here's the red pill, and then the rest of your life is spent living in alignment with that. And I think any tool is a powerful tool, but I also think that people default to psychedelics too fast, because I've had more
Mm.
profound experiences in breath work than I have on DMT. And I mean that. And I've had more profound experiences in transformational breath work than I have on ayahuasca, and vice versa. And so what everybody has to remember is that they're vehicles, but they're vehicles to the same destination, and there's no easy path to get there. So it matters that you have modalities that help you connect with yourself, because that's what psychedelics, that's what plant medicine's doing. It's bringing you back into you. So if you think of other tools like fitness or working out in silence or breath work or meditation or transcendental meditation or stillness or yoga or all of these other tools, our bodies naturally produce DMT. And with breath work alone, you can have psychedelic experiences and clarity. And we even facilitate these in my events. And we've had people after breath work come up and share that they walked their inner child back to their parent and healed and forgave themselves while they were breathing for 45 minutes. And so all these things are possible. So I think it's more so, rather than looking at like plant medicine or psychedelics, looking at the whole subset of those tools, as those are parts of them and pieces of them, but can all be utilized. And so like if you study ayahuasca, and I don't have an opinion on this, but down there in Peru, Costa Rica, for the lineage, the thousands of years it's been around, they drink ayahuasca during child labor. The children have it when they're born. It's used for medicine. Like my shaman, Taita Juanita, who oversees where I go, is 109 years old, but he's been drinking ayahuasca since he was 8, right? So there's all these different paths and things and lineages. And so I think it's independent for everybody. I know personally with our daughter, we took a very open approach of like, these are tools. They can be used recreationally, not consciously, or they can be used as tools intentionally. And we always took that approach, and we were always open with her. And so I think it's unique to everybody, but I think looking at the whole holistic picture of everything that we can do to help or empower ourselves as humans without things outside of ourselves is the most important part, whether that's plants, tools, breath, nature, or anything in those lens. And I happen to believe heavily in plant medicine since it saved my life.
It saved mine too. And interesting that you say that they took it when they're pregnant. We learned that we are pregnant without any pregnancy test. My wife did ayahuasca when we were 1 month into it. So we had no idea. We weren't trying to get pregnant.
Wow.
We had no idea we got pregnant. She comes back from ayahuasca, is like, I think I'm pregnant. I had this vision of a child. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, can you go take a test? She took a test. Boom. Oh, there's your video.
That sounds
And
about right. And that sounds like ayahuasca.
yeah, she learned that she's pregnant. She's 3 or 4 weeks into it during an ayahuasca trip in upstate New York. And she came back like, I'm telling you, I'm pregnant. I'm like, well, let's go take a test. We took a test. Bam, comes back positive. And I'm like, that is unbelievable, right? But it also kind of saved our marriage because I was a dick back in the day, and she forgave me for a lot of things through that experience and transformed me a lot. So that's what I was thinking about. Definitely going to Peru, and we've been way over an hour. I'm sorry about that, but I thank you for your time.
No, you're good. We do have to wrap now because I gotta go
Yeah.
and get ready and hit my list. But we can definitely do this again. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate your time. I thank you so much for your insights and for your authenticity. It's unlike anything else, man. That you're authentic, and the ripple effects you're having, I'm telling you, you don't even know about it, but they're there and they're unexpected. And I thank you for it, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And should I tell everybody where they can check me out?
Yes,
Before
please
I
go
forget.
ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Your podcast, Mind of George, is awesome.
I'll make it easy for everybody just so you can go see the pink website. It's mindofgeorge.com. I mean, Zach will tell you everything's linked there, but my Instagram also, if you DM me, it's George Bryant. But mindofgeorge.com, the podcast is up. I think we have over 400 episodes now, and I believe they're all really, really good. So if Zach says so, then you can go take a peek.
Oh,
But
absolutely. My son listens to you in the car all the time. So
I love it. I love it. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. And for everybody listening, thank you for thanks for listening. And hopefully there was something helpful because you gave me the gift of time that I can't give back to you. So I just hope it was helpful.
thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye bye. Bye bye.